Hi, I'm James Shillinglaw. I'm here with Matthew Upchurch, who is Chairman and CEO of Virtuoso, and we're here at the Virtuoso Symposium today in Rotterdam, actually, and we're on 7 different river ships for this meeting. But we wanted to talk today a little bit about some of the things that are going on in the industry and how Matthew sees them. And he gave a speech to the delegates here a couple of days ago that I thought was very interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and his thoughts on the industry today. And this is Insider Travel Report. Now, Matthew, the other day you mentioned that you are still having a challenge with some suppliers who see travel agents as intermediaries. That they travel suppliers, and they can't really understand that they're just not a barrier to direct business. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I have a particular perspective that I just think the word intermediary is an outdated word. I think, and we can sit down and split hairs, but for me, at the core of that definition, in my perspective, goes back to an era where there really were technological and physical barriers that prevented a producer of a product from really getting it to market and getting it to the end consumer. We now live in an era, because of the logistics revolution, the technology revolution, all these different things, where show me one product that actually cannot be purchased directly, right? Mm-hmm. They all can. So the point is that if everything can be purchased directly, then why would a consumer choose not to? Mm-hmm. So the existence of these different people. So if somebody chooses to deal with me, and you're the producer, you want to call me an intermediary. But to my client, I'm not an intermediary.
Well, you said that word intermediary is probably outdated at this point. Right.
I'm not an intermediary to my client. I'm primary.
Yeah.
You happen to be an element of what they're coming to me for. So I think there's and the only reason, look, does it really matter? I want to sit down and argue about the definition. Mm-hmm. The definition ultimately is not the issue. It's some of the unchallenged assumptions around some of these words that I think petrify certain ideas in place, rather than looking at some of the nuances of what can be done. And to me, that's one of the things that happens when people then paint certain situations with too broad a brush.
Well, I think also that still you have a lot of executives, even at the highest levels of some companies in the travel business, that still don't quite understand the role of agents, and they think that they look at it as a cost. And you had an example of that recently where Marriott cut its group commissions, and then you had another example where Hyatt suddenly said, we are going to promote travel agents in our digital marketing. Talk a little bit about that contrast and how you saw that.
Well, first I want to be very clear that I actually don't believe it's an issue of the company per se. There are people in all these companies, including Marriott, very much so, that fully understand it. So I want to be clear that I think one of the problems sometimes is some of these unchallenged assumptions and the lack of being able to prove a certain cause and effect. So you've got people at all these companies that understand that there's this kind of ability through a certain type of interaction, like a human interaction, that elevates the ability to drive a higher yield because you've elevated the experience. The truth is that society in general, through technology, investor pressure, there's always this pressure, more for less, more for less, more for less, right? Get me more sales at a lower cost, more sales at a lower cost. One of the problems that I think happens, and this is particularly true in luxury and experiential stuff, is that there does come a point of diminishing return. Now, to drive a larger picture, I believe that every single industry in the world is polarizing between optimized commodity and optimized experiential.
Right.
And by the way, death is in the middle. You can't be like slightly a good commodity play and slightly a good experiential play. You better be damn good at both. Now, the one company that's scaring everybody today is Amazon. Because if there's one company that really is starting to get those two things together, now that's a whole different subject. Okay. But if you look at this is where you go back. So there are individuals at some of these companies who are being driven by stock pressures, this, that, the other. But I think what's difficult is that it's hard to sometimes look at that cause and effect.
Yeah, well, and it's a question I've asked you several times over the years, and you mentioned it again in your speech about the role of travel advisors today, both the role they have with travel suppliers and with their clients. What is that role now?
Well, first of all, I think one of the things that first of all, the role of the travel advisor, just like I was saying, intermediary, right? The role, people do not go to a travel advisors today for information. And by the way, with the evolution of AI, they may not even be going to them for what we would traditionally know as knowledge, right? Oh, I've got all this knowledge. People go because people are overwhelmed. There are two terms I recently heard by this brain scientist, Jim Quick, or brain expert, that I just love. Digital dementia, but the even more powerful one is decision fatigue. People are overwhelmed. And so a lot of people go, Daniel Pink wrote a great book, To Sell is Human. People go to advisors not for information, yes, for some knowledge, but they go there for clarity. They go there to collaborate. They go there because doing so with this one person is fun, right? It's collaborative, it's fun. So there's really more about clarity than it is. And people today aren't stressed with the idea of they can find the answers. It's stressing out about whether I asked the right question.
And also, you have to find someone as a travel advisor who knows you and your tastes and is going to. Now, in fact, you said, and there was a good phrase, I think you said, high-end travel advisors typically achieve the highest rates at some of the lowest distribution costs, which speaks to their value to travel suppliers, right?
Absolutely. And so I think that one of the reasons that advisors deliver some of the highest rates is, like, if this were to get out in the consumer media, it would be, oh, you're in collusion to up the price, right?
In fact, there recently was an article that said that. Which was great.
Exactly. And what's so funny is the way we achieve higher rates is by elevating the experience.
Right.
Meaning, when an advisor picks up the phone and calls Roberto Payer here at the Waldorf in Amsterdam and says, hey, by the way, Misty's is coming and this is what she likes and da-da-da-da-da. That kind of collaboration and that human connection elevates. And what it does is it makes it something worth paying more for. And by elevating the experience of the experience of the planning, of the anticipation, of the execution, and then after the sale, today, I will never stop saying this. The number one thing I have to keep reminding advisors on is our consumer data says the conversation after the trip is the single most important value proposition between a transactional agent and a trusted travel advisor. So what's interesting is that we elevate the experience and generate this, and when I say lower distribution costs, you look at what you get because of the combination of those two. And then the other thing that's a follow-on to that is, how many meetings have people sat around from a marketing perspective? Well, what are the right words and what are the right images and what's the right this? One of the things I think makes travel advisors such a powerful sales and marketing tool is that the diversity of the advisors.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Right? The diversity of the advisors, their ages, their backgrounds, the way they present. Somebody's an introvert, somebody's an extrovert, whatever. The diversity of the advisors mirrors the incredible diversity of the clientele. So, for example, you look at these river ships, right? The fact that every one of our advisors around here, we have a lot of Europeans, we have a lot of non-U.S. Members who are on these ships and are blown away. Their ability to go back to their home markets and present and get and be able to overcome a conventional wisdom bias that's out there that, cruising is this or cruising is that.
Or river cruising in this case.
Right. That is whatever it is. So that's a very, very powerful part of the value of an advisor, because you sit around and, you might try to create 3 or 4 different personas for your product. Oh, the honeymooners or the older people or the this. Great. So how many personas are you going to be able to market appropriately? Yeah. But if you have a sales force of advisors that you're connected with, their ability to translate your value proposition in the language and the style and the intonation and the culturalization that they understand is irreplaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the last question I really want to focus on is, what do you believe the role of Virtuoso is today as a network with your travel advisors, with your preferred partners, and what is the value you bring to the table?
I think I think what's happened in our most important evolution is, I'm now convinced that the diversity of our network is actually our greatest strength. The problem from a business perspective and a support perspective is twofold. Number one, as a brand, the more diverse you are, typical branding is, oh, well, this brand means this consistency. Well, consistent about what? Yeah. So for us is, what does the Virtuoso brand represent at the consumer level that allows it to be meaningful to the consumer and yet realistic in the fact that all of our members operate differently, different styles, different things. Some charge fees, some don't this, da, da, da. So for us, I think it's one of the best books ever written in business, in my opinion, is Simon Sinek's Start With Why. Mm-hmm. People buy the why and they commoditize the what. Mm-hmm. So for us, we want the Virtuoso brand to be a why brand. Mm-hmm. I hear from a consumer perspective, I hear that Virtuoso is that organization where people care, they know you, they're interconnected, and they elevate the experience, right? So that from a consumer. From a B2B perspective, what we're focusing on is configurability. What does that mean? That means that the very diversity of our membership, technological platforms, training, product mix, as we become more global, right? I mean, it's really, so what ends up happening is our ability to change the way we're organized so that we can effectively provide the right ingredients to each one of our members that allows them to supercharge the unique way in which they go to market. That's what we're focusing on.
Well, Matthew, it's always great to talk to you about these topics. You're one of the great thought leaders, I think, in this business, and you actually think a lot about this stuff. And as we've all, it's not just travel agents versus suppliers and this kind of thing. And we've seen this network evolve tremendously over the years. And here we are on the Netherlands on 7 different river boats. Who would have thought that, right?
Well, and I love that collaboration. I believe that, the whole thing about, I think, just if you give me a second for here, one of the biggest problems in society today is this whole idea of you're either with me or against me. Mm-hmm. And the problem with you're either with me or against me is that critical thinking stops. So for me, one of our core values at Virtuoso is seek to understand, which, by the way, also means, hey, I'm happy for you, man. If that's the way you're going to operate, I have no problem with it. I just choose not to engage with that. And there's a legitimate play for people out there to do business a certain way. You just have to be clear about what you want to do and how you want to partner, and then spend your time and energy with those that believe what you believe.
Matthew, thank you very much again for inviting me to this year's symposium. It's been great. And we still got a couple more days here to enjoy these river cruises, and always great to talk with you.
Thank you, James, as always.
I'm James Shillinglaw, and this is Insider Travel Report.